I'm a professor of gender and violence and international policy at the University of Bristol, and have been doing research on all sorts of violence against women and children, and work on perpetrators, sexual violence, domestic violence, forced marriage, etc. for many years. And very interested in issues around gendering of domestic abuse, because I still think it's an issue we really need to talk about quite a lot. And we still see, it's a really important factor in terms of services and so on. So what I'm going to talk about is just some of the background data we have on this, but I also want to talk, I was asked by Siobhan if I'd just talk about a project we've done recently that was also led by Women's Aid, but sort of a joint project we've had, which was also looking at gendering and misogyny in domestic abuse cases, because it really shows up kind of how the processes around gendering also work. So I'll talk a bit, and then, but if you've got questions, just jump in, and I'll take questions at the end as well, so we can have a bit of a debate. But just the parameters, which you probably will know about anyway, but that's definitely the patterns we see. Women are more likely to be victims of domestic abuse, and that's in the UK, but also internationally. And part of that is also repeat victimization. So often in the prevalence data, we come up with, like in the English Wales data, like so many other places, if you just look at headline prevalence, you get something like 1 in 4 women, 1 in 6 men experiencing some sort of domestic abuse in the last year or so, or in the last ever or so. But once you start looking in detail at what's going on underneath, of course, those quite close figures start to really disaggregate a lot. And one of the reasons is that the type of things that are experienced by men and women are actually, and that they're recording on a lot of these surveys, is quite different. So repeat victimization is one of the things that's really different. Women end up experiencing that pattern of domestic abuse over time and longer term. What men are reporting may just be a one-off thing, or less likely to be so repeated over time. Women also much more likely to be seriously harmed or killed. I mean, domestic abuse murders, much higher where women are concerned. So we're beginning to see that kind of similar sort of figure of experiencing something or other, as I say, really disaggregating in terms of the number of events over time and the seriousness of those events over time as well, the harm that they actually cause to women much more than men. And then also there seems to be a differentiation in terms of levels of fear, that the type of fear that women experience is quite different. It's, the violence that women, and I'm talking here about almost exclusively violence from men to women, and women experiencing that really scary domestic abuse, and that's what's inducing levels of fear. And also when you start then looking at, I know that in Ireland you've been discussing having legislation on coercive control, and we've got that in the UK. And the coercive controlling behaviours, of course, are those really often difficult things to see, but all the variety of behaviours that perpetrators will use to make sure that the victims do what they want and continue to control them. And that's also bound in with much higher levels of fear. That type of abuse, again, women much more likely to experience what we might see as coercive controlling behaviours. So what we end up with, it really, from the various evidence, is that there are differences in abuse experiences by gender, by sex, and that also reflects the unfortunate patterns that we still have within our societies of the structural inequalities against women, and women may face multiple inequalities. And of course, it's also reflected in something like the Istanbul Convention, which talks about how, and also the UN frameworks on violence against women, which talks about gendered inequalities leading to violence against women, disproportionate amount of violence against women of a gendered nature, but also how it recreates those gendered inequalities as well. And if you look at something like, how does, again, domestic abuse work? It's quite different if men or women are perpetrators as well, because of course women will also use violence against men or against other women, or men will use violence against women and against other men. But it is these different patterns. So for women from men, we see, as I was just saying, more fear, control, mix of coercion, physical, sexual, and financial abuse. Whereas men, when they talk about what they experience, they're much more likely to talk about abuse as a form of emasculation. It seems to be much more about dents to their masculinity, to their sense of entitlement, than scary, fearful kind of advance and abuse. And that also means that you actually get men talking about being able to manage the violence from women in a way that women can't manage the violence from men. So, for example, in some of the interviews we've done over the years, men talking about how, they were able to grab the woman and take the knife off her, whereas when the women, they weren't able to do that with the men, and they just tried to get the hell out. So really different experiences and responses. And also men from other men. Now that's similar to what women experience from men. So it is about male violence against women and against men. So fear, control, but also difficult to see what's going on as domestic abuse. Also experience sexual violence. And one of the things that comes up quite a bit with men on men domestic abuse is control of spending. But of course, we also see economic abuse and financial abuse in heterosexual relationships too. But this also maps back onto the Johnson typology, which you may have quite likely come across. So he talks about coercive controlling violence, or what he's also called intimate terrorism. And he talks about violent resistance and situational violence. But of course, what we see from the evidence in terms of what mainly women experience from men is also that coercive controlling violence, that intimate terrorism that Johnson outlines, with men as the primary aggressor, even if women are using violence in the relationship too, primary aggressor being the man, and more likely to cause fear and be coercive controlling. Whereas with violent resistance, that's where we see women's violence against men that's seemingly at a high level of violence, but because women ending up using weapons, but in resistance. And we often see that in police databases, that women end up with very high levels of arrest or offences, but because they're using weapons, but not necessarily as a primary aggressor, but as a way of protecting themselves and their children. But then it's the woman who ends up being seen as the perpetrator. And that's really problematic. And then you get situational violence, which is much sort of more ongoing, sort of low level, once-off situations, possibly in both directions of the couple, but also can be in contexts where there's a lot of chaos, and some of the alcohol and drugs misuse where there's not a primary aggressor, but where they're kind of, it's part of an ongoing really chaotic situation. So these are quite different scenarios, and they also therefore need to be thought about in different ways. So I always sort of wonder, you know, what about who you're working with? What's the shape of what you're working with? Are you working with intimate terrorism, violent resistance, and or situational couple violence? So unless you've got anything specific to ask about that, I want to move on now to look at some of this work that we've been doing with Women's Aid on looking in more detailed at the gendering, the sort of the narratives, the discourses around gendering that comes up in domestic abuse, in experiences of victims and survivors, and also in the discourses from professionals who work in with survivors. And you can look up the whole report. It's, I personally think, a fascinating report, so do go off and look for it on the Women's Aid website. And this work, it actually, we looked at, in this particular piece of work at 36 transcripts of interviews with survivors. But it came from a set of interviews from our Justice Project, where we'd done 251 interviews with survivors of all forms of gender-based violence. And we'd also done a considerable number of interviews with professionals. And we'd also tracked cases through police databases, over 1,400 cases. So this work comes from that wider project. But what we took for this one was to look at in a real detail at these 36 interview transcripts. Now, I'm just going to close my curtain a little bit so that I can actually see. That's better. There it has been. And the 36 transcripts that we chose for this study was really because we wanted they're all domestic abuse experiences, but they're also a real range of survivors in terms of social class, ethnicity, age, and disability experiences. So we made sure that we actually had the reflection of a whole set of different intersectional kind of issues as well. And then what we used is what's called critical discourse analysis, which is really looking at sort of both what's there and what isn't there, if you like, but in terms of what people are, the kind of ideas people are using and drawing on. And the things I want to talk about here are sort of three of the main themes that we came up with, which is the way that household and relationship roles are talked about, and then some of the issues in terms of sexuality and links with intimate partner relationships. And also mental health actually came up as a very important issue in these discourses as well. So in terms of household roles, what came through were things like women saying, you know, they were told that they had to strive to make sure the relationship was working. And the onus was on her. This thing that she was being told either by family, by friends, by professionals, that she was the one responsible, really. That's what this indicates. So she had to strive to make sure the relationship was working, rather than them being told, well, he has to stop being abusive and violent. And we need to think about how we're talking about these things and what it is that we are actually implying when we use these different forms of these different terms and these different language approaches. They're told, don't call the police because he had a good job. So this guy was, you know, middle class, professional, don't rock the boat in terms of his profession, his job. That instead of that he has put his own job at risk by behaving abusively. she's told, what did you do to upset him? Instead of, why has he chosen to be abusive? And we keep seeing in these ways that the women are being talked to, that the onus, as I said, is on her. It's not saying actually he is the one responsible for what he's done. So if we look at that in terms of these household roles and the household discourses, we have at the center of that the woman is seen as the homemaker and the man as the head of household, which seems very traditional, doesn't it? But that's actually still what really comes through when you start looking at what women are told. And so she says, it's my job to run the household, and his to basically tell me what to do. So you get this, you really get the man as the decision maker. And he also micromanages their household tasks by not making decisions in household tasks, but kind of in a wider sense telling her what to do. And it's something that Catherine Donovan and I also found when we were looking at LGBT, or especially LGBT relationships, that these rules in relationships are really important to situate somebody as either an abuser or the victim. And this who takes on the dominant decision maker role, it's a gendered kind of perspective, but can also, in the same-sex relationship, be placed on one of the two partners as well. So you got here the female homemaker, not a role that she's taken, or that she's wanted necessarily, but she's ends up tasked with household chores and childcare. But she's not the one who is ultimately making the decisions about how this is to be performed. He is performance managing her and saying if she's not doing things right. And that all the time is being underpinned and reinforced by threats of violence and abuse. So she says, I'd be called to account if things weren't done. Just to be subservient and just to do everything that he said, or not to have a voice or opinion. That's how I'm supposed to be. Another one, I kind of thought it was normal at the time. A man tells you what to do and you do whatever he says. And then you've got the sexual violence aspects, or the sexualization of sexuality, the constructs of sexuality in these relationships as well. And of course, we see that in a very obvious way within things like pornography, where women are objectified, women are objects. But the sexual objectification of women also very much going on through these relationships. And we see it in the discourses that the women talk about. So, and women, one of the themes that you get through from that is how women are sexual objects to be used by the men in their sexual gratification. It's not about what women necessarily want in terms of fulfilling their sexual needs. And again, the onus is to be sexually available to the male partner, and not the other way around. And also feeds into all the narratives about sexual jealousy and women as sexual objects to be jealously guarded as belonging exclusively to their male partners, not to be looked at, not to be commented on, not for anybody else to flirt with. She gets it in the neck, so to speak. She's the one who gets told off if she's seen as sexualized by any other man as well. And also rape and sexual abuse then is routine as part of the domestic abuse. That she has to be available in these different ways, but also that it's used both to put her in her place, but also to show that she has to be there for him. and within again a wider context of sexual objectification. So again, the different women in the transcripts talking about, you would tell me that when you're in a relationship, basically you have sex, even the other person doesn't really want to. Sorry, these have got a bit mixed up, haven't they, in my slide there, but like, he forced things like oral sex and contact and stuff like that, and then raped me quite regularly, but not sort of in a violent way, more of a coercive way. And then this one, if I can't really move that one, sorry. And then we've got the mental health discourse as well, where what we see centrally here is this idea that actually the women are crazy. The men keep talking in ways that situate the women as being crazy, that she's mentally ill, and therefore she is the problem, not him and his abuse. It's her who's crazy, and that she's making it up. So, you know, it's also kind of into the sort of gaslighting territory. So giving her that label of mental illness, which has all sorts of implications for the women, because it may be that the professionals actually at times believe that, or he manages to get her sectioned, and I mean all sorts of possible consequences for her, also in terms of her relationship with children or links to children, etc. As I say, she's the one who is labelled as problematic instead of him. And also that this shows very little understanding by others of the actual mental health impacts of the abuse that she's experiencing. And that, of course, she may have mental health consequences from the abuse, but that's not because she is the crazy woman, but because of what he's doing to her. And that's what we really need to think about. So the women end up being painted as emotional, unstable, crazy, and not to be taken seriously. You shouldn't listen to her. In the end, we end up listening to the abuser. And therefore, he can use it as a tool for abuse. So again, some of the things that the different women said in the interviews, you know, they're painting me as this crazy woman. And it's no wonder that your children are messed up with a mother like you who's so mentally crazy. That's what she's being told, that she's the crazy mother and that she's impacting her children in that way. Or he's tainted them against me and told them I'm a complete and utter lunatic and a maniac and a twit. And also in the courts, especially the family courts, where, as this woman says, the courts are extremely sexist places. There's still very much a thing about an angry, loud woman is crazy. So if she's trying to sort of say what's really happened and the frustration of her ending up talking with a loud voice, actually, she's very quickly placed in a position of being crazy. And on the other hand, the abusive men are charming with professionals. So we see how these different things end up situating the woman as she is this crazy woman and situating her as the real problem. And this quote, I think, is so important. It really exemplifies so much about what the women were then saying, that we really need to turn around this whole way in which people keep ending up labeling women, making women responsible, you know, allowing men to use sexual violence in relationships. And this woman talks about her resistance. So she's saying, what describes me is being bullied to death, you know, and reacting to being bullied. So she is trying to say what's happening to her. But what label is that? You know, so I've had mental health issues as regards to being depressed because of the situation. But that situation is oppression. It's not because I am crazy, is really what she's trying to say. And she says, I call it oppression, not depression. I have a different description. So let's end up in this place where we say, yes, what it's about oppression of women. It's not depression, but it's depression that has been placed on women by abusive men. And if you want to read the whole report, it's there on the Women's Aid website. So I shall finish there. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Marianne. That's really interesting. And I think you really got to the nub of it in such short notice as well. And it really is, I suppose, the positioning of women in society, and then the family home being a microcosm, I suppose, of that. I'm conscious that you're rushing away. You have other
Well, I can take some questions. I think we're just horrified at this. You know, what we always think of. Oh, it's kind of this sounds such old hat, or you know, it sounds so traditional, but it's there. You know, it's now. We're in 2021, 22. You know, when we're looking at these things, and
the microcosm of the home is.
Yeah, and it goes across women from different, you know, from really different contexts as well.
Yeah. Has anybody got any queries or questions? You can unmute for them, or if you want to put something through chat, I'm happy to read it out if people don't want to.
Hi, Claire. I mean, Siobhan, isn't it your name?
It is. Hi, Noor. How are you doing?
Your name here is Claire, but anyway.
Yeah, you're saying yes. That's what they always say.
Thank you, Marianne, for that. And I'm just wondering, because we have all this like narrative, is it like a possibility to, I mean, you know, the people who's working with domestic violence women, and even in court, is it possible to use this narrative in, like, say, oh, this is a crazy woman, that stands out the most because we are having the same thing. They are treating the woman as crazy, but the woman seems to be like, because of the things that are happening to her, that's what makes her depressed and been sent to the hospital and, you know, been called crazy. In fairness, if we have this into like the doctors or the psychologists that have this narrative, maybe it's like an alarm or red flag for them. Say, okay, this is not just a mental health issue, and we need to further investigate. This might relate to a domestic violence, because if we have this red flag, it will save the woman in the future, you know. Yeah, because it looks like it's too late sometimes, and they end up dying already. So
I think what you're saying is so important, Amal. You're about Amal. I don't know what.
Noor is my name. Sorry.
Noor, sorry, Noor. Yeah, I think what you're saying is really, really important. And actually, Women's Aid ended up writing a whole report on the mental health issues. Which is very, very good, and they've been using it in training in the UK, and that also very much draws on this work as well as from some of the other work they have from their own helplines and so on as well. So, and I think you're absolutely right. This is a red flag. If they start talking about, you know, mental health issues and crazy woman, they've got to ask what's going on behind that. What's going on in your relationship? You know, you have to look at that. But the other part of that, actually, we did a very big study of men in GP surgeries, in doctor surgeries, where we surveyed 1,300 men attending doctor surgeries. And we actually found that men who said they had anxiety or depression were 5 to 6 times more likely to be perpetrators of domestic abuse than if they weren't talking about having anxiety and depression. So actually the red flag goes both ways, that you've got to ask what a guy's up to. If they're also saying, oh, I'm sad, and of course they don't talk about necessarily being depressed, they talk about being sad. So men talk about being sad and women are talked about as being mad, you know, is that sort of kind of division. But we need to ask, get the medics really looking at that both ways.
Thank you. We just have
Yeah,
a comment as well there, just to say thank you. It's very informative, especially the oppression and depression piece.
Yeah, so I think you put that up on your wall.
Yeah, and the mad and sad. I mean, that's really interesting
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Marianne before she has to leave us, or comment on her piece, which was really interesting?
it will be interesting to know about the men, because men rarely say anything about their feelings. That's very difficult to know whether they've been domestic abused, but that finding is another red flag, I would say,
Yeah.
for the men one. But to be honest, we are dealing more of the woman, because the women are more the fear is much more bigger than the male one. So yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, Siobhan, I would just say that I was looking at two pieces of research. One was the Australian Institute of Criminology, and the other was the Home Office in the UK. And both of them at the end came up with that it was perceived violation of gender norms and the challenging the offender's masculinity. And in that, another piece of research was saying that coercive control, that micromanagement, was the golden thread running through domestic abuse and homicides. And I think that's your presentation there really encapsulates that. And it's really interesting. I was looking at a case study last night, and you might be familiar with Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie in the US, where there's a body cam of the hour that the police spent with two of them after they were pulled in, after a witness had seen him slap her. And she ended up being deemed the primary aggressor. And her partner, Brian Laundrie, actually called her a bit of a crazy woman. And then the whole conversation became about one of the police officers. His wife had been similar, and she took some medication and she was much better now, his ex-wife. So this is the common thread: coercive control and fixed gender roles and challenging the masculinity.
Yeah, thank you, Madeline, for saying about that as well. It also makes me, there's one particular example that I always sort of think back to as well in terms of the men, which is one of the men that we interviewed. He who said he'd experienced domestic abuse, ongoing domestic abuse, but for him, what that consisted of was that his wife, he'd married a much younger woman. And really, he wanted to spend the weekends with his mates, his male mates, going down to the pub. But she wanted him to spend time at the weekend going to a garden centre to get plants and to look at ways of doing their garden. And that was what he said was abusive, because he found it so shameful and so awful to have to tell his mates he couldn't go down the pub because, he was going to a garden centre, that was so emasculating, that was abusive. And you think, no. That's something really, really different kind of. That's not domestic abuse. To have to go to a garden centre, you have to work out what then work out what you want to do. But that's not the kind of the real.
Yeah, the perceived.
Yeah. And it fits back into what you were saying about that emasculation as well.
Yeah, and that
we've got to be so careful that we end up with seeing dense to male entitlement as being abuse, and that's why the men who are the perpetrators end up seeing themselves as the victims.
Yeah. And the Home Office in the UK, one of their recommendations was funding for training on attitudes, and you're saying it's like we're going back 50 years. It's like,
yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, we still haven't nailed it, and it is that that you're picking up on the micromanagement. And I think so often we end up standing too far back and looking at sort of wider patterns, but we really need to look at this micro stuff and what's going on to see how it works.
Yeah.
Anyway, I shall have to go, but
thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great to have
do go off and look at the reports.
Absolutely.
On the Women's Aid website, and I hope you can all use it in training. Yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah. Thanks so much, Ryan.
Have a good session. Bye then.
Thank you. Bye-bye. So without further ado, thanks to Marianne. With I don't know, do Noor or Ashling want to toss a coin, or will I just bring Noor in to do your piece? Are you ready, Noor, to start your piece? I can't see you anymore. Oh, there you are.
Yeah, I'm okay, Ashling, if you, yeah. I haven't, I mean, the only thing that I prepare is our information, because this is our first time doing education session for, I am like, after Marianne, I don't know, because she's preparing too. I mean, the information that she have is very good and very informative for everybody here.
And no doubt yours will be too. Thank you. Do you need to share anything, or are you just happy to go ahead?
I would just go ahead, but let me see if I can. I have a presentation, but it's only talking about what Amal is. Can I start with that first?
Whatever suits yourself. Yeah, I've allowed you to share this, so work away now. I'll keep going.
Before I do, my colleague here, the other Amal group is Hanan Amir here. She's the founder of Amal Women Association. So she's the backbone of all the things that's happening. So I just welcome her in here as well. Just see if this is going to work out. Bear with me. This is my first time. Okay. So this is we as Amal Women Association, we like I said, me and Hanan started years back in 2013. The reason behind that is when we do our kind of coffee morning session, some of the women have their issues. So then we decided to make Amal Women Association as a company to take it further and to start to present ourselves. Amal Women Association is Amal for short, and Amal means hope. So in fairness, to start this project, we are trying to bring hope to the other women and inspire them to be on their feet, to be able to get back to their own life. So we are providing frontline service for the Muslim woman or the woman who connection with Muslim community. So our mission is to advance the human right, health, safety, participation, and dignity of Muslim and non-Muslim women in Ireland. Our vision, Ireland where all women, particularly Muslim women, can access the services they need and fully participate in a society free from threat of violence, from poverty, racism, discrimination, and stigma. I just want to iterate that because some of these women don't really know their rights in the country. So they kind of, especially the one that doesn't really have a connection with the community, so they stay silent and they don't really know what to do if they have any issues with the husband, or for instance, we were talking about the male as a dominant, as the person who bringing the money into the company, to the family, so the breadwinners, as we say. So the woman is having the fear there, if they don't really comply with the husband, they might lose up the food on the table. There's no food on the table, or who is going to look after their kids. So this is why we are doing this, to help especially the Muslim women to know their rights in Ireland. So we have our services mainly have 3 sections. So we have women's section where so because women, I don't know who's making this thing, but women are the heart of everything we do. So that's the reason why we are doing this, because we are women and we are, we believe that women are strong and that we can change the world. So Muslim women have a lot to say and a lot to contribute in Ireland. So as I mentioned, we start the coffee morning, and from the coffee morning, we have some trainings and special project. And we also provide support, advice, and information. Within this women's section, we have this helpline services where if women have any issues, they will call our helpline number. And our lovely ladies here, Hanan, will come and support her with her issues. And sometimes I do help Hanan too, because sometimes there are a lot of cases at one time. The second stage would be our youth club. The reason also behind this, because we want to empower other young women, young girls, to become independent themselves, just to brush up, empower them to be able to stand on their feet. So this generation is the first generation to grow as a Muslim Irish. Young people are growing in time of growing Islamophobia and suspicion of Muslim communities. So there's a lot of discrimination around, so they are having this experience. So we are doing this youth club to help them to be able to kind of have their own voice. Whenever they have any issues, they can speak up and challenge those, and to balance the culture of the homeschool and friends is tough during the young, how you call it, in the youth experience. So we work with the youth. We work to create youth workspaces where young people can explore and celebrate their Muslim cultural identity. We encourage young people to be proud of their identity, and we work with young people in non-judgmental and non-directive way and help them to develop and grow. We do this by doing youth camp and small projects with the youth. And one of the projects that we did before COVID, this is before COVID, when we assigned them to do International Girls' Day. So they're starting it from start until the finish, and it was so amazing. So yeah, we can give them some things to do to make them more they know what their role is in the future. So we kind of trying to upskill them for the future. The third one would be we are doing it at the moment. We are helping the refugee, because we know the key to helping the refugee is having a good way of communication with them, because most of them is have a language barrier. So we have a lot of our Arab volunteers that make the communication easier without being lost in translation. So under the common language and common cultures, the heart is open, and they communicate with us and share these sad stories of what they left behind and the happy ones of the brighter future. For instance, they're trying to bring their families over and things like that. We have two types of visit or outreach, as we say. Currently, we are in Ramadan. Alhamdulillah, as I mentioned to Siobhan, we were very busy before Ramadan trying to give the Ramadan food packs to the refuge across Ireland. Alhamdulillah, we already finished that. And the second stage would be after Ramadan finish, we have the Eid celebration coming up, and we go and celebrate with them there. Because to us, when we do celebrate with them, with the children there, at least it brings them a smile in their face. Before COVID, we did bring some of the families to Dublin to do the Eid festival here. Not sure if we're going to do it this year, but that's another session that we are doing. Because one of the experience that in 2016, 2017, at the early starting of this project, we feel that some of the ladies do have some issues with their husband, and also issues with the people within the direct provision center. So with the communication that we have with them, we do have an outreach and we do visit them, and we kind of follow up with if they have any issues that needs a social worker within because they are not based in Dublin. So we link them with social worker with their own in the cities, in the countryside. So this is what we do in the refuge center, basically. So the activities that we do, as I said, we have few projects for the women. This one is one of the things that we do in the coffee mornings. And we have the batik behind me. I mean, I'm just using the background, but it's not a real batik behind me. And we also do visit Scotland and Edinburgh, I think in 2019, just to go to the refuge center there and learn more about the culture there. And we do International Women's Day every year, which is a very good thing to celebrate Women's Day. The reason why I mentioned this here, because to be honest, when we do the coffee morning session, some of these women will start to talk. The reason behind it is because they start to trust us, and they start to talk about their issues. So that's where we start our kind of helping them with their domestic issues, because from the coffee morning, where we build the trust, and they starting to kind of open up. They took us in a small room. We have a few rooms in the mosque, where we do all this is done in a safe space in the mosque, so they feel safe. So they start talking to us about their problem. One of the lady, I'm not mentioning the name, but she's actually come to the mosque with her 2 children, young children, and her mom, who is blind, because she just want to talk to us secretly. So this is also the reason why we're doing this, just to open up to these women that have issues. And we know from there, she's actually having issue with her husband and doesn't know what to do. And she's been keeping it's the same as what Marianne talking about, the dominant side of men. Men is the breadwinner and giving the food on the table. So she's afraid if she leave him, no one will look after them and the blind mom. So she just, she just stay with them until she can't stand it anymore. So that's why she start come to our coffee morning and come to the mosque to kind of run away as such for a few hours with the children. But lucky, she's lucky. She be able to, I mean, at first she's hiding the passport for even the children and herself with her neighbor. So this is a way, steps for her to run away. And last that I know, she's able to go to refuge center and able to leave. But I'm not sure what happened to her next, because once we put her in refuge, then she didn't come to us anymore. But hopefully she make it to the right place, So so this is our way Amal way to open up to women to do by way of coffee morning. And by that, also we have word of mouth, like people start talking. Okay, if you have a problem, go to Amal. And we also have some recommendation from because we work with the community garda, so some of the guards calling us because the woman doesn't really speak English. Sometimes they call us about Urdu. We don't really know how to speak Urdu, but we source it out, and we try to help as much as we can. So that's how we start basically with our project. So I will stop sharing because that's voluntary, and this is our website and the information that we have. Yeah, I can get Hanan if you want to get more, give more details about our project. But at the moment, we are new with this court accompaniment service. Where we have few cases that we need to accompany the woman to court, not to translate or to just to be there for the woman, because of also the language barrier. Some of them doesn't really know English, so we kind of translate, not translation with the one that assigned, but some of the translation a different, a different way of communicating with the woman. So their service quite new. Last year we did it. There's few court case that not we, it's Hanan is the one who's going around and she's a superwoman here, and I am just behind what she do. So our aim to be having a Muslim woman refuge. It's still a dream because it's quite a very big journey to go there. But yeah, that's our main dream. Because when the women go to refuge center, first of all, the list is very long for them to go in. Second, they don't really have the culture. They're just shy and afraid that what will happen to them if someone else knows. So the stigma of the community, the Muslim community is quite close. So people know people. So when they go to refuge center, what will happen to their own, self-esteem and stuff like that. So if we have a Muslim woman refuge center, it's a start to kind of, I don't know, close the it's a bit hard to kill the stigma of that, but yeah, it's something to start. Hanan, if you have anything to say.
Hello, everyone. I think Noor, she gave us all the details about Amal Group. And I think all of you know the way of the man, how he dealing with the woman. But we have an extra in our community, like, the violence, not only by beating up or verbal, but he also, he controlling about her visa inside the country. And this one is make her silent for anything happen to her. And we was wishing if we can put our hand together to changing the law here, to can give her the freedom for something like this. It's really hard and nobody can help in her because that's the law. But about the violence, like it's happened in our community, like any community in all the world. Okay, I know it's about, you remember the accident that happened in, the Christmas Eve? This lady, she was in our community. And that's not first time they beat her up, but in Christmas Eve, he killed her. You know, we have a lot of our community like this, and I'm really scared every day to wake up in the morning and to hear another story. We try our best, but I think it's not enough. If you want to ask me anything, I'm here, like, you know, to can explain about our community and about anything, please do.
Okay, thank you, Hanan. Just when you're talking about having a separate refuge for Muslim women, I'd be interested to know why you think that would be better than having, you know, what we currently have. What are the benefits of having a specific Muslim refuge? And then also maybe what are the barriers that are in our refuges that maybe make it difficult for Muslim women to enter them?
I can answer that.
Thank you.
The problem is actually the refuge here, they give all the women very very good service. Okay, I agree with this, but the problem with us or with our community, the English barrier, and also the culture. The woman inside the house, she don't know exactly what will be happen to her. She will go out of the house and for nothing. She don't know the service. She can speak about herself. She don't know her right. That's why she prefers to stay in the house. The husband, he beaten up more than to go to other place. She don't know anything about it. You know, the man here, when he bringing his wife from her country, keep her inside the house. Don't let her learn English. Don't let her to go outside. He keep her inside the house all the time. He's know if she go outside, she will learn more. But he refused that. And if she's starting just only to hear, she didn't get the step yet. You know, he taken her passport, he taken the kid's passport and pushing her or make a game to her, take her for holiday and leave there and take all the passport or also the kids and come back without do anything. I have another case with me. It's happened. Like, you know, the woman, she don't know anything. She stay with her husband here. He take her to her country and just only sleep in the night time, wake in the morning. She can't find any paper to say she been exist in this country. Okay. And when we try to speak with the embassy there, the Irish embassy, they said to us, we can't do nothing. Her husband, he can do all this paper back to her. Okay, her husband, he do that to her. You know, how we can get another what you call it, paperwork to say this woman exists. She's already have 2 years. Still, she has 2 years staying in Ireland, but she can't come back. You know, if she's no English, if she's know about the service, is she not going to be scared to get the step?
Of course.
You know, I didn't say the service is not enough. No, the service is good, but like, you know, we're trying now to go to any community or any community center or to talk with any social worker to let them understand, like, you know, if I'm sorry if I say that, like, but if any woman should not have English language and she saw me, I go with her to the places, you know, I speak about her situation and she saw me, I'm like her, I'm foreigner, I have a broken English, but I try to help in her, all this. I know her culture, what she have to do and what she can't do, you know. She will feel comfortable to can talk about her cases, you know. That's why I say I would not like, yes, our dream to have what's called woman charter for us, but why not we can like, the Irish charter, they can use us. We all working as a volunteer. We're not taking anything like, from this whatever from our group. Okay. We don't mind if you using us to can save this woman, or to let her at least get the chance to say no.
To build courage to the woman, actually, that's very difficult.
Yeah. It's really our problem is harder more than the Irish way, because we not have a family, we not have friend. Even our community is very hard to can spoke in front of my friend to say to her about my situation. I will be scared next day. All the communities, they will know about it.
Yeah.
I'm not have a family to go and cry with them to say help me, or to get at least break. And I say, oh, I'm not coming back home. We not have this facility. If I go out of my house now, where I can go? If I go to the mosque, they will not go and let me stay inside the mosque, sleep in it until I got the what's called ticket and I go to my country. If I go to my friend, her husband, he will call my husband and he will say, oh, your wife, she was with us. Okay. I do not have small thing to can say, I'm here, I'm exist. Anybody, please listen to us. That's in my idea. If like, I give you the, like, let you understand our situation. I don't know.
Yeah, no, thank you. Is there any more questions for Noor, Hanan?
Hi, Noor. Hi, Hannah. Nice to meet you. I was just wondering, I know that Anne-Marie kind of asked in the question box there, you spoke about the outreach that you do in the coffee mornings and the youth groups. Are they all based in Dublin, or do you have a network of volunteers around the country that would support, especially young girls as well, in the rest of the country, kind of nationwide?
Actually, now when we start in Dublin 8, okay, but thank God now we gave the idea in Sligo. We say to Sligo people now, like, we have a few of volunteers. They do, it's not similar work, but they starting. Okay, and now also we have some people inside the Cork.
Very good, yeah.
Okay, we try, it's very hard to, but we try, like, to give the idea, because it's very hard for us, like, if anybody call me from the countryside and I travel to them, it's very hard for me.
Absolutely, yeah.
I try to help her by the phone, and I try to give her the service beside her house, because she don't know.
Yeah. And then what do you think then, as a service that supports women in domestic abuse, what could we do to support women within your community more? Could we be doing anything that would make the transition to link in with us any easier, or, even their work with us? Is there anything we could, kind of do as a domestic abuse service to support women, to kind of, to show them that we're open and here to support them?
I think if we cooperate with us, like, if we cooperate, like any community cooperate with Amal Women Association, you can be involved more in our community. Like, when I talk to you about our community, Muslim community, I have a very hard to go inside the Somalian community.
Okay.
They are Muslim, yes, but it's very hard to go inside this one.
Yeah.
That's why I try. Each day I try, but it's really, I try to use Somalian people to go inside this community, but in the end, we all Muslim and we all have our culture, okay, a religion. It's like, is affecting us much in our life. That's why I say it's better, like, to cooperate with Muslim women. It will be easy to be inside this community.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So to, I suppose, grow those links of people that are within the community already. Yeah.
Just to let you know, the kulok, I don't know how to pronounce AB. Yeah, that thing. Kulak service normally have a Muslim woman that refuge there, and they'll always link with us for halal meat or for prayer mats and for Ramadan food packs. So if you have any Muslim, so because now it's Ramadan, it's a good idea to give Ramadan food packs and prayer mats and Quran, and let them know that they can also still come to the mosque to pray. And thing is, sometimes when they go to your refuge center, they are alone. So it's best to get them to link with their own community so that they feel more kind of together again, to build their, it's difficult to build their strength back, but if you have other support system that have the same culture, I think this would work best. So that's the reason why Hanan said link with us. We can link with the women. We stopped the coffee morning because of Ramadan, but we're back in May, and we have to they love knitting, so we have knitting project and all other art craft. So yes, women like doing women stuff. So we are hoping what we do. We have a transition. We thinking of helping them to do a business on this. I mean, to provide for themselves. Just this is a very long way. Yeah, it's still in planning stage. But when we do, then we can help the women to be on their feet, not to just if the husband handle all the financial, we want to give the woman the financial freedom so they know that they can do, I am into empowering women, so I'm sorry I talked to
No, that's great, Noor. And what we'll do is we'll share your details again, and you share them there as well. And thanks so much for the input there. I'm going to move on, although it's really interesting to hear what you do, but just to move on, just because we're going to run out of time. But if that's okay, we will share the information, and I know here in Clarehaven we'll definitely be contacting you again and making that connection. I mean, even things like knowing about maybe having some prayer mats and Qurans and the halal food in at times like this, particularly, it might be really useful for us even to get a stash in for our own service for the women that we work with who are from your community. So I'm just going to move on now to Aisling Dove, and then if there's time at the end, we can have more questions, or Noor has shared her information with us already, and I'll also share that again through our Twitter and Facebook and all of that. So thanks very much, Noor and Hanan, for that input. And now Aisling Toomey from the Rainbow Project, looking at the experiences of LGBT women. I'll just go hand over to you there now.
Yeah,
so
I'm making it difficult following two incredible ladies talking so passionately about the work that they do. So you're making it tough act for me to follow. Siobhan, I've got a bit of a presentation that'll just keep me on track and will help me to zoom through things as quickly as possible, because I know people will be itching to get away for a cup of tea or whatever.
So you have sharing rights there.
Sharing rights, there we go. Perfect, great stuff. So hello everybody, my name is Aisling Toomey, my pronouns are she, her, and I'm just going to give you a bit of an overview in terms of the work that we can do. Hopefully everybody can see that and see my lovely photograph there. I look very professional, don't I? Yes, so I'm the advocacy manager with the Rainbow Project. If you're not aware of who the Rainbow Project are, we are an organisation in Northern Ireland that was established in 1994, and we work to promote the physical health and emotional well-being of lesbian, gay, bisexual and trans people in Northern Ireland. We're the foremost LGBT organisation in Northern Ireland, and we have two centres, one in Belfast and one in Foyle in Derry. Question we often get asked is how many LGBTQI people are there in Northern Ireland? Well, the Northern Ireland population, according to the last census and estimates, was about 1.8 million. And based on statistics and some estimates, the range for people who identify as LGBTQIA is between 6 and 10%. So 6 and 10% doesn't sound like an awful lot, but actually, if you compare that in sort of numbers, it would range between 90,000 and 183,000. So quite a substantial amount of people in Northern Ireland. Again, this is only estimates, as there's no official kind of record for anybody who identifies as LGBTQIA. There can be many reasons why people choose not to participate in a census. I've seen some of the discussions over the weekend in regards to the Irish census that's going on at the moment, and in terms of people not being asked around their sexual orientation or their gender identity in that. So we've had similar in the north as well. So these are just some of the key organisations in Northern Ireland that work to support the community. There's 6 key organisations there, Rainbow being one of the largest with about 22 members of staff. And then across the other organisations is a makeup of full-time, part-time and volunteer staff. But for the entire region of Northern Ireland, so a population at the highest estimate of 183,000, there's approximately 35 members of staff working to support the LGBTQI community. We did have a dedicated domestic abuse officer who was based in Hiranai and Carafriend, but unfortunately their funding was subject to grant funding and it was not refunded. So we've actually lost the only dedicated member of staff working specifically with women and girls who experience domestic or sexual violence. So that's a real shame for us as a sector. The support will continue through the organisations, and I'll talk a wee bit more about that as we go on. The Rainbow Project is an organisation, again, working with LGBTQI people, providing counselling, peer support, sexual health support, family support. We also provide advocacy support for victims of crime. Now, primarily, we are funded for hate crime, but we find through the work that we've done with the PSNI over the last 10 years, LGBT people are not solely the victims of homophobic and transphobic hate crime. They experience a whole range of issues in regards to it. And when it comes to domestic and sexual violence, it's often because of their sexual orientation or their gender identity that they have been targeted and victimized. Here and I is an organisation that works with lesbian and bisexual women and their children and their families, again providing peer support and emotional support for those women and their families. Again, there are link ups between the two organisations. Currently, we've just launched a mental health project with funding from the Department of Health, which is a joint project between Here and I and the Rainbow Project in terms of providing better mental health support for LGBTQI people and their families. Carafriend is an LGBT youth organisation providing peer support and emotional support for young people between the ages of 14 and 25. Again, they would take the lead on education issues, so they would go into schools and provide LGBT awareness training for students and teachers. And again, we would work in partnership with them in terms of the strategic work on an educational level as well. All those 3 organisations work in partnership with one another when it comes to issues around domestic abuse, because it has an impact on each sector within our community. Unfortunately, we've lost Amanda, who was our gender violence officer, but within Here and I and the Rainbow Project, we have 2 full-time policy managers, myself and my colleague Danielle, who will take up a lot of the slack in terms of the strategic work on a government basis, and then our advocacy officer within the Rainbow Project will continue to support victims of domestic and sexual violence. I actually got stats off them yesterday. Since January of this year, we've had 15 referrals into our service from LGBT people experiencing domestic and sexual violence. The groups that you see at the bottom are mostly volunteer-led trans organisations, and these are organisations that work to support families and individuals where someone identifies as trans, non-binary or gender fluid. Transgender NI is a campaign and lobbying organisation for the trans community. SAIL is a support service for trans people and their families, and stands for Support, Acceptance, Information and Learning. And then you've got Gender Jam, which is the trans and non-binary youth services. So again, there's a lot of multi-level in terms of the support that we provide specifically around domestic and sexual abuse, but we can also signpost individuals who contact us for support into other ranges of support in terms of family and their experiences. So how big is the problem of domestic abuse in Northern Ireland? Now, I've included a funny picture just to try and lighten the mood, because we're often in these presentations, I'm usually following on, so it's been heavy all day. It isn't a funny thing, but it just helps us to take a moment to actually lighten it, but also highlight the fact that nobody knows in terms of LGBTQI experiences of domestic abuse in Northern Ireland. Despite widely held research and statistics on domestic abuse, there are no official figures in the prevalence of crime on LGBT people as victims. So we know 32,000 incidences have happened in Northern Ireland. We know approximately 2/3 are women. Of that 2/3, we don't know how many identify as lesbian, bisexual or trans, and the same within men who are victims of domestic or sexual violence. Again, we don't know how they identify in terms of sexual orientation or gender identity. In terms of the work that we do as an organisation, obviously we are limited in terms of capacity in this area of work. So we look to build partnerships with key stakeholders and other organisations. So we work with the Belfast Domestic and Sexual Abuse Partnership in terms of awareness raising and progressive work to tackle domestic and sexual abuse. We sit on the Domestic Abuse Stakeholder Assurance Group, which is a large body of people made up from government departments, the police, the probation board, the Public Prosecution Service, Women's Aid, Men's Advisory Project, a whole range of different organisations that come together. We also sit on the PSNI Advisory Group on Domestic Abuse, the Women's Sector Forum, the PPS Advisory Panel, and we support our colleagues in the Raise Your Voice who are speaking out against street harassment and sexual harassment in Northern Ireland. We've effectively lobbied the PSNI to start recording all Section 75 characteristics when it comes to domestic abuse. And these Section 75 would not only look at sexual orientation and gender identity, but it would also look at members of the community who are people of colour, religious and disability as well. So it's really important that we find out the intersectionality of the victims of crime so we can help to establish better services for them. We've provided evidence to the Justice Committee on the new Domestic Abuse Bill and the Coercion Control Bill and the Stalking Bill and the Non-Fetal Strangulation Bill. So there's a lot of strategic work that we've been doing over the last number of years. Also, we're expanding our services in terms of working with the Domestic and Sexual Abuse Helpline, working with the PSNI, working with Women's Aid and working with the Men's Advisory Project to make sure that pathways are clear for victims of domestic abuse and that we're able to put that wraparound support. Again, everything focused on what that particular victim needs and how we can best support that. And again, we've been funded by the PCSP, which are local groups here in regards to work around women and girls and specific awareness raising. A lot of the research from the Rainbow Project has shown that the LGBT community experience two things. One is isolation and the other one is invisibility. And invisibility is caused by heterosexism, which is existing all around us, where professionals often assume things or are relying on stereotypes for LGBTQI relationships. There's a real lack of investment and research into the experiences of LGBTQI people, especially those experiencing domestic or sexual violence. There's a poor understanding or awareness within professionals as well around the unique coercive control elements that are targeted towards LGBTQI people. When it comes to RSE, religious and sex education in schools, it's often marked by conservatism here in Northern Ireland. There's an avoidance of any discussion around LGBTQI identities and specifically in regards to sexual orientation and gender identity when it comes to consent and healthy relationships. Refugees here in Northern Ireland often don't have a policy, or it's very unclear in regards to their trans inclusion policies. And currently there is no refuge for gay or bi men in Northern Ireland whatsoever who are fleeing domestic abuse. The reason that we talk about collecting data is that if you're not there, you can be discounted. And I think Noor and Amal talked about that as well in regards to the experiences of Muslim women who are experiencing domestic abuse. If they're not able to feel confident in reporting either directly to the police or to support organisations, often they're cast in the shadow and they can feel isolated. And again, Noor and Amal talked about that double isolation that they feel in terms of that barrier of language and the lack of awareness around what their rights are here in Ireland. And again, that's something similar that the LGBTQI community would experience, and certainly those who are newcomers to Ireland as well, asylum seekers who are dealing with internalized homophobia about their own experiences, the barriers in terms of accessing that because of language. And again, we raised the issue earlier about threats, that sort of fear of their masculinity being cut under by reporting domestic or sexual abuse. And again, the issues in regards to immigration status are very much part and parcel of that as well, and includes children. But data is really, really important because it allows us to help to tell the story of the LGBT community. It helps us to create spaces and affirm the LGBTQI communities. It identifies the disparities in policy, service development and legislation. It helps us to secure funding for our organisations go forward. It makes sure that we're informing public policies and laws. And we want to see it statutory bodies, especially here in Northern Ireland, where Section 75 was brought in many, many years ago. A lot of the public organisations and statutory bodies are failing to actually monitor that. So therefore are failing our victims across the board in regards to recording that. So the invitation was on the back of some research that we've done carried out by the Rainbow Project in regards to the state of the community. And the state of the community was a piece of research that we did with the LGBT community in Northern Ireland. We had over 1,100 responses. There was over 130 questions and 11 focus groups. Demographics of that, 45% men, 43% women, 7% non-binary, 1.4% gender fluid, and about 4% of others. And then the breakdown in terms of age as well. So it's really, really good statistics that we've had. We're delighted with the response that we did get. But some of the key findings that we found in that were specifically around domestic abuse. Now, we asked a whole range of questions. When did you know you were LGBTQ? What's it like being an LGBTQI person in Northern Ireland? What's your experiences of crime? What's your experience of homelessness? What's your experience in education and employment? A whole range of different things. So it was quite a substantial piece of work. But in regards to the response to domestic and sexual violence, these are some of the stats that we picked up. Over 50% reported being in a relationship that was harmful, hurtful, either verbal, physically, or sexually. Over 65% have felt frightened because of the behaviour of a partner or someone at home. 46% have experienced violent behaviour from a partner or someone at home, and 18% experienced financial abuse from a partner or an ex-partner. 61% experienced controlling behaviour by a partner or someone at home. 32% felt pressured to have sex or perform a sex act that they did not want. 22% have been physically hurt, and 55% have experienced emotional abuse by a partner or an ex-partner. But the most staggering of all is that over 68% of those who experienced violence, abuse, coercion, or intimidation never reported it to the police or any support organisation. Only 9% had reported to the police and less than 4% to other services. So there's a massive, massive issue in regards to the experiences of LGBTQI people and the reasons that they're not reporting to the police or to ourselves or any other support organisation. Now, domestic abuse, as you'll all know, these are the key issues: coercive control, psychological, emotional, physical, sexual, harassment, stalking, and online digital abuse. But for members of our community, there are additional elements of abuse that can be specific because of their sexual orientation or their gender identity. There can be forms of abuse that are targeted towards us because of our sexual orientation and our gender identity, and that will often stop them going forward and seeking support. Some of these include outing. So outing somebody as a member of the LGBT community, whether they are gay, lesbian, trans, or non-binary. using intimidation and threats of this disclosure or their status as HIV to friends, family, to their colleagues and workplaces, undermining their sense of self in terms of their sexual orientation or their gender identity, making them feel guilty or feel ashamed around their sexual orientation or gender identity, making them feel whether there is validity in their sexual orientation or gender identity, and this can be targeted towards our bisexual members of our community, where they can be questioned over the validity of their sexual orientation, and the same for those that identify as asexual within our community. Telling members that it will tarnish the LGBTQI community if they talk about the abuse. And I think Nor and Mel would probably say that that would be something similar that would occur in their community, where you shouldn't speak out about that. Do you want to bring us more shame? And that's a form of control as well. There's the fear of having to come out as an LGBTQI person in order to access mainstream services. And that's a real fear for people. Intimidation and threats connected to children, and claims that children will be removed from their care because of their sexual orientation or gender identity. This is something that happens quite a lot with gay and bisexual men. And the same fears are there for lesbian and bisexual women, especially if they've been in a previous heterosexual relationship. This is something that can be used towards them. I've had a case recently with a trans woman where the female perpetrator in that situation kept accusing them that they were mentally ill, that there was an issue with them, and why would they allow the child to continue to see their parent. So that was something that was used quite recently. Again, I've talked about the immigration law being used to threaten someone with deportation, especially back to the country of their origin, especially where that might be unsafe. We live in a society, and especially in Northern Ireland, for people of colour, for newcomers to our island, it is a hostile environment. It is especially hostile for those from an LGBTQI background, where they have to prove their sexual orientation. The onus is on them to prove their sexual orientation or their gender identity. So again, an abuser will be aware of that and will use that as a threat towards someone. And I've had a case recently where the perpetrator, male in this situation with another male, who said, well, I'm going to write to the Home Office and tell them that you're not really gay and you're just lying in order to get asylum here. So that's something that is used. Blaming the fact that you are LGBTQ as an excuse, saying, well, it's your fault, this is what happens in LGBT relationships, you just don't know, you just don't understand. Again, we talked about some of the rules that are applied to stereotypes from Marion's presentation earlier on. There are these sort of non-written rules. This is how women get on. There are stereotypes within lesbian relationships of a butch and a femme person. You know, is the butch automatically the perpetrator and the femme the victim in the situation? There are all these stereotypes that exist out there, and myths, and again, fueling the internalized homophobia, biphobia and transphobia of the victim. This is one page on our website that gets the most amount of hits, is that internalized homophobia. There is still a stigma today in Ireland for being a member of the LGBT community and for being a trans person as well. And again, that's a narrative that's going on at the moment. I want to talk about intersectionality, and I just want to pick up just on hate crime, because this is another important aspect to the work that we do. Hate crime is on the rise in Northern Ireland and across Ireland as a whole. Just to give you, I won't dwell too long on it, but just to give you the statistics, we've seen an increase in racist incidences of 366 incidences. Incidences have risen in homophobic hate crime, sectarian hate crime, disability and religious. And many of the clients that we are working in, there's a multi-level to the abuse that they're experiencing and the harassment they're experiencing. And if you're living in a society where you're being victimized because of the color of your skin, for your religion, for your sexual orientation or your gender identity, that cuts right to the core of who you are as an individual. It underpins and swipes away a lot of the security that you have within yourself. And especially if an abuser, and it was talked about in the previous presentation, that if you are new to this community, if you're unsure about your rights, if you're unsure about the support that's there, often you can feel a prisoner in your own home or a prisoner within your own community. And sometimes it can be difficult, especially for those even within the LGBT community, to speak to other people about the abuse that they're experiencing, because it is small. And we do, like Nora said, we all kind of know one another in a lot of ways, and that can lead to difficulty. So it's really, really important that we reflect that hate crime is on the rise, and that domestic abuse is on the rise as well. Touch very quickly on, because I don't want to keep you too long, and I want to get the opportunity for some questions. Over 1/3 of all domestic abuse reported to the PSNI, the victim has identified as male. We don't know if they're gay or bi or men who have sex with women. We don't know. Another stat from our colleagues in Stonewall has shown that 49% of men have experienced at least one incident of domestic abuse from a ex-partner or family member since the age of 16. So it is a huge issue within our community for men. I want to touch on mental health as well. And it was raised in some of the conversations earlier on, where the women were coming to the mosque and were seeking support. And sometimes they just say, I just need support, I just need a bit of help, or there's a distress there. And it's often during those conversations that disclosures will happen. And we see this as well within the LGBT community, where people come and talk to us for counselling support. And actually, once they have built up a bit of resilience and a bit of trust in our counsellors, then they're able to disclose the experiences that they have. Or often we can talk about those experiences and actually make them aware that what they're experiencing is domestic abuse, because often they don't recognize it themselves, because the narrative that we are constantly surrounded by is very much firmly set as a female victim and a male perpetrator in a heteronormative relationship. So it can be very difficult for members of our community to recognize themselves as victims. Just again, some touching on, have you ever experienced depression? Very, very high stats right across the community in terms of self-harm, very high, about 40%, particularly high within the trans and non-binary community. Thoughts of suicide, again, very, very high, specifically high within the trans community. And was your depression or your is your depression related to your sexual orientation or gender identity? Again, quite high statistics within the trans community, and then about 1/3 within that. I want to close off on just a case study. You could flip it to the opposite gender. But this is Peter. Peter was a 42-year-old professional. He was living in Belfast. He'd been in a civil partnership for 2 years. He had a partner, Jake, who lived with him and was on a spousal visa. Peter contacted the Rainbow Project to say that he needed counselling, but via those counselling services, he disclosed that the abuse had been going on 2 years. He was fearful that Jake would out him to his work. He was fearful that Jake would out him to family if he phoned the police. He's worried about his partner, that because his partner was on a spousal visa, that if he reported the domestic abuse, then his partner would be deported back to his country of origin, where it wasn't safe to be an LGBTQI person. And there was a lot of shame and fear and regret and anger all wrapped up in the same thing. So it wasn't a simple case. And it took a lot of work with them to build up the confidence to talk around domestic abuse, to talk about their experiences before we could even mention about reporting it to the PSNI or any other organisation. So I'll leave it there. I've probably skipped over a lot, but I'm just conscious of time and I don't want to keep you too long.
No, that's brilliant and very, very detailed and informative. And I'll just open the floor again to everybody, if anybody has any questions for Aisling around the issues around affecting LGBTQI members of our community.
Thank you, Aisling. This is my first time knowing that there is, like you just mentioned about the spousal visa. I never know. This is I'm learning from you. I didn't know that they have this. Where are you based actually? You in Northern Ireland, yeah?
Yes, we're in Northern Ireland, yeah, in Belfast.
Okay, maybe that's why.
Yeah, we would work with the UK Home Office. So it would be a slightly different immigration process than the south of Ireland.
Okay. That's the thing that a bit confused me, but yeah, it's good to know. Learning process every time.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. I think the thing is similar. The isolation and the discrimination,
Mhm.
and especially the racism or the attacks are there. I mean, I can vouch for that
Yeah.
for you guys and for ourselves as well, because recently, actually 3 days ago, one of this is not just talking about domestic issues, but one of the person who works with us in the mosque, the security guard, on the way to the mosque got attacked by 3 men and been on the head
Oh.
and in the hospital. So that's how crazy the world is now. So this is just to mention.
Yeah.
I
I'm very sorry to hear that, and I hope they're doing well and in recovering. But like you said, for especially marginalized communities such as ours, it's so important to have that specialist support for members of the community, because we're culturally aware of issues. Particularly in regards to, so for Muslim women, it's the importance of women-only spaces because of their faith, and things like that, that they're more open to having those conversations with them. For us, for the LGBT community, it's having that understanding about the different types of relationships that we have within the LGBT community, but also around the complexities of individuals who are trans or non-binary. And having that space to talk about their experiences. And again, we would be similar, that we have a dream of a dedicated housing space for LGBTQI people, because there could be many issues again that they face of not feeling safe going into mixed housing with both genders. They can feel sometimes scared of going into single sex environments as well, because I'm thinking specifically for a client that I worked with, which was probably one of the most severe cases I've worked with, who was a HIV positive man who was gay, who was in a seriously violent domestic abuse situation where the police were called out on numerous occasions. They were referred to MARAC, which is like one of our highest sort of case studies. And he was really reluctant to go into, like I said, there are no hostels for male victims of domestic abuse here in Northern Ireland. So his only option was a homeless shelter. And he didn't feel safe going into that because of his sexual orientation, because of his HIV status, because of the trauma that he was going through, but also the fear of going into that situation and experiencing homophobia from other men in that location. But also, unfortunately, some of the hostels that we have here in Northern Ireland aren't always safe. There are people there with alcohol, with drug misuse. So it's not always a safe option for any individual going into that, especially for those who are fleeing domestic or sexual violence. So we would be of the same opinion that we would like to see dedicated support put in place for LGBTQI people, that there are safe spaces, that there are clear policies from hostels and other agencies to show that they're LGBT inclusive, and that we can helpfully signpost them into that service as well. Again, so it is a bit of a wish of ours as well, but we're very much of the opinion that we believe there should be dedicated advocates for marginalized groups, because we can able to address some of the barriers and close some of the gaps in terms of people being able to reach out and get support. And oftentimes we find it's those initial conversations that help people to move on to the next step, or and assist them into getting the support that they need. And we've seen that with the hate crime work that we've done, where we've seen an increase in the reporting to the police, which means they're getting in contact with organizations like ourselves, because once they report it as a hate crime, they're automatically referred to the Rainbow Project for support, which means that we can get that counselling in, which means we can get that housing support, that sexual health support, a whole range of different things that are put in place. And like I said, we're sad that we're losing our gender violence officer in Amanda, but that work will continue through the services that we provide and the partnership working that we have with Women's Aid, MAP and the PSNI. So we're still fighting the Department of Justice. I was speaking with executive ministers yesterday and flagging out the high statistics of the experiences of LGBTQI people in terms of domestic abuse, and the fact that there was no dedicated support for that. So we keep fighting on for that, and I'll stop talking now.
Can I share something that once of the experience that I realized, I mean, the talk from the visit that we go to Scotland, one of what is very interesting when they work with the city council there, and the women that have issues with domestic and needed a space, what they do is they provide for her a house for the year, for the whole year, and then until she on her own feet and she can be in her work, you know, something to ponder. I don't think there is something here in Ireland, but I think maybe something that, I mean, we wish, like Aisling did, we wish that there's something to be done in the department level, in the Department of Justice or City Council or something. But I know the housing crisis is very high at the moment, so I don't think they would really go with us with this, but that's a wishful thinking. It's a good idea to have those options, so that the women and the children that fleeing this the domestic issues can live for free for a year, and then until she on her own feet, then she can move to a different and get someone else to take over that space. So something that I just remember that I thought that I shared, because maybe Aisling, you can talk to that Department of Justice for those men that have that issues. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think the Minister of Justice is sick of hearing about me or looking at my face. But no, it certainly, I mean, we work with Women's Aid as well, and we're pushing to make sure that their funding is secured in terms of the amazing work that they do in terms of housing women within hostels, and especially during COVID as well, those kind of short-term COVID refuges that we needed to set up. But again, there is that gap in it. And actually, you know, in terms of members from the BME community or people of colour, one of our hostels in South Belfast, it would be predominantly women of colour who are accessing that. So there, you know, we're seeing that need coming through. But again, it's all about, like I said, those facts and figures. Unfortunately, sometimes that's what government departments want, and it's great that, you know, we try and build up that evidence to say there is a need here for victims, specifically from marginalised communities, who need that additional level of dedicated support with cultural understanding from whatever aspect that might be.